Brittany Higgins was raped by Bruce Lehrmann, and that's according to Federal Court Judge Michael Lee.
In his pursuit of gratification, he did not care one way or the other whether Miss Higgins understood or agreed to what was going on. By conclusion on rape, Mr. Lehrmann raped Miss Higgins.
Now, this was a civil case, of course, not a criminal finding, the result of Bruce Lehrmann's defamation proceedings that backfired quite spectacularly. But as part of this decision, Justice Lee also said the cover-up allegation was objectively short on facts but long on speculation and internal inconsistencies. No minimisation of Ms Higgins' experience was attempted, and to the contrary, attempts were made to support and reassure Ms Higgins. Now, Sam, you broke the original story. You were, of course, then subjected to proceedings that were discontinued as well. You followed this closer than I think possibly anyone. What did you make of the judgment itself?
Well, I think that is a judgment that we've read in law schools and talked about for many years, because what Justice Lee did in it is he has brought clarity to the situation. So like a labourer in the lost gardens of Helligan, he's hacked through all the undergrowth and come to this position. He did so, I think, with a lot of compassion and a lot of common sense. So he talks about in that judgment the idea that, well, you know, maybe someone on the CCTV can look not legless, but when we examine how much she drank, she was clearly under the influence of alcohol.
You went into a lot of detail.
He addresses some of the rape myths and things like that. But I also think there was something else that happened that was important, which was not central and not as important in all of those things, and we'll get to the cover-up issue in a moment. And that is, through the evidence of Taylor Orbach and the work of all the lawyers, from Sue Chrysanthou, SC, to Malia Saunders from Channel 10 and Matt Collins, KC, they managed to get this evidence from Taylor Orbach that the judge said was, quote, significant on the issue of who has been leaking Brittany Higgins' phone and her private details. And not just her phone, you know, we don't know the answer because he didn't rule on this, but a whole bunch of other material that was in spotlight. And I think it is worth just pausing and having a think about what has actually been going on over the last year. The judge made findings on very discrete elements of those leaks. He didn't find in all the cases that Orbach said that material was leaked by Bruce Lehrmann to Spotlight, didn't uphold all of that. But in the instance that he did, he painted a picture of what has actually occurred here, which is that if you follow Justice Lee's findings, a rapist has weaponised the records obtained by police for a criminal trial to humiliate and target a rape victim. And he has sold that material to the highest bidder, Channel 7. And this is something that is very serious, and until Justice Lee made that statement, no court in the land, whether it is Walter Sofronoff, which wasn't a court, or even the ACT Supreme Court, has been prepared to take action on this or even investigate it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. As for the political cover-up element of this being dismissed, Phil, this obviously was politically costly for the Morrison government.
Incredibly so. Incredibly so. I mean, yeah, I thought, yeah, I'm sort of the view that Justice Lee has provided probably a fairly good version of events, and I sort of, you know, I think the broad acceptance is, you know, what he said is sort of more or less what happened. And I think, yeah, the two important findings are A, you know, Miss Higgins was raped on the balance of probabilities, and B, there was no cover-up, or also on the balance of probabilities. And though, you know, and that is significant in terms of the politics of this, because it did it destroyed Morrison, and it caused enormous damage to the government of the day as the story ran, and people just wanted to believe it was a cover-up, even though there was no sort of evidence, or it was your word against theirs. And there's a lot of anger in the coalition over this. So if you just talk about in the political, we just separate the personal tragedy from the politics.
But I think you also need to unpick that a little bit, because you know, the use of the term cover-up was not in any of the original stories. It wasn't in my story, but let me finish. Okay. But I mean, it was first used by Penny Wong, right? And this thing basically, you know, picked up the issue that Justice Lee squarely addresses in relation to both Brittany Higgins' testimony and Channel 10's program, is this idea of roadblocks, was the term I think the project used, to a police inquiry. And the judge basically says, well, first of all, far from stopping you going to the police, Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown were desperate for you to go, so much so that Linda Reynolds was putting pressure on Fiona Brown that she felt uncomfortable. And in relation to the CCTV, his attitude was, of course they can't show it to you because you're a witness, and there's no spooky music about that. It's about the fact that Parliament has all these rules and regulations.
But I think that Justice Lee did do a great service in pulling apart the allegation of rape and the allegation of cover-up, and in his
disentangling
finding,
them.
pulling that apart, because in his finding about Channel 10, he did say they were insufficiently critical around the issue of or they didn't look critically enough at the issue of cover-up.
Yeah, the allegation of rape, he said, was the minor theme of their coverage, and the allegation of cover-up was the major.
But I would argue that there's a lot of other commentary which was insufficiently was overly dismissive of the allegation of rape. And there's been a lot of coverage over years that was effectively painting Bruce Lehrmann as the victim in the whole show, and that the Me Too movement should come down because of the whole show. Well, he's also put paid to that kind of argument as well. So I think the pulling apart has really helped clarify how...
Where does it go? Where does it go politically? Yeah. Because it was, as part of a personal tragedy.
Some of Scott Morrison's language at the time didn't help.
Well, he didn't help himself with it because, as I said, it was like a porcupine in a balloon shop. Every time he opened his mouth, everything came out arse about. Like when he said about the women protesting...
Not far from here.
Lucky not to be shot, or the thing I had to talk to my wife to appreciate the gravity of the allegation. But it was interesting, Peter Dutton's language then, I guess, are they going to pursue this once Parliament resumes?
So are they going to pursue the payout?
Well, they're going to pursue Labor's treatment of it. He's exonerating Brittany Higgins there. He said the beef's not with her, but is the payout warranted?
Or is he going to allow that to play out through the court?
His language is interesting because Justice Lee's beef was with Brittany to some extent. I mean, he had a problem with some of the language in the deed, right? And obviously there's a bit of politics going on there that Peter Dutton is trying to sort of shift the dial a little bit. Look, I think...
And just to be clear, her claim for damages went to the fact that she was sexually assaulted at her workplace, suffered psychiatric injury, economic loss, victimisation, bullying and inadequate support. Now, some of that you can argue about now, but clearly...
Large parts of it are true.
And this is the other thing I think we just have to back up at the truck a minute on the payout, because I think there's a lot of nonsense about it. The thing about it is this, and the only person who's ever been able to properly explain this to me is you've got to go and talk to a personal injury lawyer like Peter Gordon or Slater Gordon, right? There's a lot of people that write about this and they try to say that this never happens, it's completely unusual, it's completely unprecedented. Now, there's all sorts of criticisms you can make of the process, but it is not unprecedented. It happens all the time. All the time is, I shouldn't say, but Rochelle Miller got $600,000.
I think there was something like 18 of these.
Yeah, and it was the same deal. That I do find it strange, and I think it should be looked at, that when Rochelle Miller got $600,000, they didn't interview Alan Tudge, right? They just paid it out, because what you're doing is the lawyers are negotiating with the insurers and they're making this... They're making
very
this
quickly
decision.
on this, because I just want to touch on a couple other things.
But there's no way Brittany Higgins is going to have to pay any money back, that's for sure. I mean, they might have some complaints, or like the Nat can look at whatever they want to.
And
but,
Linda Reynolds suing Brittany Higgins. She says in the statement last night, Brittany Higgins, that yes, there was hurt, and for that I'm sorry. Peter Dutton obviously welcoming that as well. It's up to Linda Reynolds though now to decide what she does with this.
Yeah, that's a matter before the court in her defamation.
All right, on it goes.